Hey, welcome back to Brighter Rays. We started last time looking at Proverbs chapter 6, verses 6 through 11. And so today we're going to be looking at the first part of it, which says, "Go to the ant, O sluggard, consider her ways and be wise. Without having any chief, officer, or ruler, she prepares her bread in summer and gathers her food in harvest." So we're supposed to consider the ant. Consider her ways, it says. So your teacher is the ant. Now God has used wisdom to create. And we're going to see that later on as we continue through Proverbs. There's a whole section on where it talks about how God uses wisdom to create all things. And so God has used wisdom to create everything. Therefore, even in the fallen state of the world, the marks of wisdom are everywhere. Like the curse has not erased every mark of that. It hasn't completely degraded the beauty and the goodness of how God created. Now it's marred, yes, but not completely obliterated. So we should still see some wisdom in the ways animals act, the way he made animals able to adapt to their environment. I mean, that's what evolutionists are studying, right? Just the ability for a being to adapt to its surrounding. They're obviously not studying, dogs becoming cats and then becoming horses, and then that not that kind of species evolution, but we are seeing animals having the ability to adapt. That's wisdom. So if they're in salt water, some fish have the ability to adapt to go into fresh water, and some have the ability to, have little legs, and some of them don't. Doesn't mean that they're changing into a different creature. They're still a fish, right? It's still a fish, but they have the ability to adapt whatever they're in. And some amazing adaptations that they have, but that all that information is already built into that animal. It's not like it's the DNA is learning something new. So anyway, that's a little side tangent. But if we believe in a God who's a God of wisdom, he should be able to create animals that are able to do that. It makes sense. I mean, if he has, obviously God knows what would happen. He knew that the fall would happen, so he knew he had animals that would be able to adapt even to the fall of mankind and the curse of the universe. It's pretty amazing. So the means of learning is to consider her ways. Consider the ant's ways. This is how we're going to learn. Now, the sluggard is lazy because he has not considered. We're going to get into talking about the sluggard a little bit more later on. But here's this lazy, sluggardly person has not considered. Considered is a good word because it's used in various different places. Like in Hebrews chapter 3, we're called to consider Jesus. It says, "Therefore, holy brothers, you who share in a heavenly calling, consider Jesus, the apostle and high priest of our confession." So we see here, we're called to consider Jesus. So considering, stopping, thinking about something, meditating on something, on a topic or a person, the Bible tells us to do that. And we're called to consider the ant, to consider her ways. How does she work? How does the wisdom of God displayed in the way ants act and behave? Just like we're called to consider Jesus. What did he do? Who is he? He's the apostle and high priest of our confession. What is our confession? What is that common confession that we have as Christians? What did he do as high priest? How is he an apostle, a messenger of God? What message did he bring to us? And so all those things we're supposed to consider. In Philippians 3:17, we hear about how we are to consider the way Paul and the apostles walked and how they lived their lives. It says, "Brothers, join in imitating me and keep your eyes on those who walk according to the example you have in us." So he says, brothers, listen, we're following what Christ told us to do. We're living out in such a way that reflects on how Christ taught us, right? And so if there's something, if we fail, if we sin, we call each other out, we repent, and then we change the way we behave. And so we're imitating Christ and then you imitate us as we imitate Christ. So imitate me. Go ahead. Imitate those who are with us, the other apostles, and to imitate their way of life and the way they're behaving. That's what you need to do. And so you're supposed to consider, think about, see their example, and then do what they do. That's the idea here of considering the ant. So you see the example of the ant and how the ant acts, and then you act that same way. Now the lesson to be learned from the ant is how to be wise, right? That's what all the whole book is about being wise, gaining wisdom, acting in such a way that is in that reflects the law of Christ, right? We want to follow the law of Christ, and this is what we have here is the law of Christ. You do these commands. These are the things that Christ has commanded you to do. And these are the good works that he has prepared beforehand that you ought to walk in them. That's what all these things are. And so this is what we need to do. Now, how are we wise? Well, the ants are continually working and preparing for the future. That's what we see here. It says, she prepares her bread in summer and gathers her food in harvest. So they're continually working to prepare for the future. We are to work continually to prepare for our future, physically and spiritually, both sides. So the way this ant keeps working, it doesn't matter if it's summertime, if it's, when they don't work and you should be hiding out because it's so hot, or if it's harvest time, it's getting a little cool outside. Now it's time to bring in all the plants. The ants are continually working, preparing for future. And so they're always storing stuff up. Now you go to 2 Corinthians 12, 14 through 15, it says, here's a physical way that is, parents save up for their children. So here for the third time, I am ready to come to you, he says, and I will not be a burden, for I seek not what is yours, but you. For children are not obligated to save up for their parents, but parents for their children. So he's saying, I'm like this. This is what we ought to be doing. Parents save up for their children. That's what you do. And he's saying this is kind of how I am. Like, I'm the parent and you're the child. So you shouldn't have to be saving stuff up for me. I should be saving stuff up for you. And that's who I want. I want you, not your stuff. And so that's how he's using this as an example. Like he's taking what should be happening with the parents and then applies that to himself as a spiritual father. So he says, I will most gladly spend and be spent for your souls. If I love you more, am I to be loved less? That's a great question. But you see here, the idea is that, physically the parents are saving up for their children. He was using that example of how he's acting as a spiritual father to them, but he's using what is supposed to be happening with physical parents, biological parents, with their biological children, right? Or their adopted children, with their children. So you see that idea is that they save up. And in Mark 7, 9 through 13, we see that children work to care for their parents. So you see actually this on the other side, when the parents get older, then the children are working. So it says, this is Jesus talking about what the people are doing. He says, you have a fine way of rejecting the commandment of God in order to establish your tradition. For Moses said, honor your father and your mother. And whoever reviles father or mother must surely die. But you say, if a man tells his father or his mother, whatever you would have gained from me is Corban, that is given to God, then you no longer permit him to do anything for his father or mother, thus making void the word of God by your tradition. They have handed down, and many such things you do. So that's the idea, is that Jesus is saying here that you guys are doing a horrible thing, because now the parents are getting older, and the children are like, well, everything I have is devoted to God, so I can't help my parents. He's saying, no, you're supposed to honor your father and mother. So if they get older, they can't provide for themselves, or whatever reason they can't do it, then the children are supposed to provide for their parents. So the parents, as they're getting, as they're young, as they're able to work and do all that kind of stuff, they're saving up for their children. And when the children get older and the parents get older, then it switches, right? It flips over. That's how it's supposed to be. And the children now are supposed to be. But what were they doing? They were not doing that. They were kind of, short-circuiting the whole thing by allowing the people to say, well, all my money is devoted to God, and so I can't help my parents out. And so the parents are suffering and not being honored as God through Moses told them. In Ephesians 4:28, we see that you need to work to share with those in need. So let the thief no longer steal, but rather let him labor, doing honest work with his own hands, so that he may have something to share with anyone in need. So here again, you have this idea of continually preparing for work. Like if you're just a thief, you're not preparing for the future. If you're just stealing, you're just trying to make ends meet. You're just trying to, get by on that. And that's what he's saying. Like, stop doing that. Stop being a thief and just get to work. Get a job, work hard, so that way you can share with other people. So don't be a mooch. You know, get a job, and then be able to provide for other people. Not just for yourself, not just for your parents, not just for your children, but for others. And then James 4:13 through 17. We do this with humility. He says, "Come now, you who say today or tomorrow, we will go into such and such a town and spend a year there and trade and make a profit. Yet you do not know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? For you are a mist that appears for a little time and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that. As it is, you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil. So whoever knows the right thing to do and fails to do it, for him it is sin." So he's saying here, he's saying if you're going to make plans, you should prepare for the future. He's not denying that you should. He's not saying you should always live by the seat of your pants here, because that would obviously go against everything else that we know. But he's saying you need to do this. There's a humility here when you're planning. So today or tomorrow we'll go in such and such a town, spend a year there. So you're making plans for the future, right? We're going to go there. We're going to go to this town. We're going to stay there for a while. We're going to trade. We're going to make profit. It's going to be great. This is what our plans are for the future. But he says, wait, you don't know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? You're just a mist. So he says that can easily vanish, right? It can easily disappear. Your plans, you can easily disappear. So you should say, if the Lord wills. You should have that idea. I mean, even if you don't say it, actually out loud, you should have that. Now, the false teacher will say, well, that's a horrible thing to pray, because then you're adding doubt in there and stuff like that. No, you're being realistic, because you don't know what tomorrow holds. You're being realistic according to what God says. He says, James is saying here, what is your life? You don't know what your life will hold. You don't even know what you are. You're just a mist. So he says, if you don't do that, what are you? You boast in your arrogance. And there's some false teachers out there. They're boasting in their arrogance, because they're like, well, God told me I'm going to live to 120 years old. Oh, really? I see here in James says, your life is but a mist. And if you're boasting about what you think the future is, you're arrogant. And you're evil. He says, all such boasting is evil. You're being evil then. But like, if you say the Lord wills, if you put that in your prayers, you're putting doubt in there. No, it's realism, right? This is real life. I don't know what tomorrow holds. I don't know what the next moment holds. And so if I'm boasting, and I'm just boasting in my own arrogance then. If I'm saying, well, I'm not gonna say if the Lord wills, because I'm saying what's gonna happen. I'm speaking into the universe. I'm speaking before God, and what your tongue says, that's what has to happen. It's this kind of twisting of the scripture. And here he says, so whoever knows the right thing to do and fails to do it, for him it is sin. So now you're in sin because you're not acknowledging the fact that you're not guaranteed tomorrow. You're not doing and making plans humbly, knowing that you're holding these things with an open hand. So we need to be careful of that teaching, because that is poison right there. That is evil. So no, we plan. We're planning to be prepared. That was I kind of had this phrase come to mind. It's like, I'm gonna plan to be prepared. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know what's gonna happen in the future, but I want to plan to be prepared for what might happen. So. It's not like I'm not saying this is what's going to happen. I'm not going to say this is absolutely what we're doing. This is how, this is exactly what's going to happen, because that would be boasting in my own arrogance, and that's evil. So I'm planning to be prepared, and that's what I want to do. All right, so the ants work during the summer, during the heat of the growing season. So the wise keep working even when the conditions are not ideal. When something is hard for one to carry, many help carry the load. You see what ants do. They dig together and they build together. If something is destroyed, they work continually to repair it. And so you see that. They're constantly moving, always going, always building, rebuilding, working together. That's what they do. And the ants gather and harvest. When food is plentiful, they do not slacken their work. They don't rest working when everything is really favorable for them. So when there's food all over the place, they don't stop working until they gather it all in, right? Doesn't take long. If you ever have ants in your house or something like that, you see that they're hard workers. They do whatever they want. You ever had one of those little ant farms? They're constantly building. You shake it, what do? They go right back to work. So it's not like they take a break. That's what ants are always constantly working. It's pretty amazing to see. So they work when it's favorable, when it's not favorable, they're just always at work. Now we have an advantage that ants don't have. He talks about they don't even have chiefs or rulers or officers. They don't have a hierarchy. They don't have governors. They don't have people that are over them helping to direct them and guide them and protect them. So ants act on the instinct that God has imbued them with. So he's given them an instinct to keep doing, keep working, keep going. But humanity is able to use reason and understands the necessity of leadership and delegating authority to lesser leaders. The hierarchy of leadership is a blessing that humans have. We're wrong to we're wrong to look at a hierarchy of leadership, and stuff like that, and to deny that that's not a blessing. Having chiefs and stuff like that, because he's saying here they don't even have these in their working. We do, and so what a blessing it is to have that kind of structure that so we can delegate work. So not one person has to do all the work, right? That's the beauty of having a hierarchy of leadership. That's the blessing. Now you have multiple people being able to, get a bird's eye view and say, okay, wait a minute, this is not quite right. So you don't just have one person in charge, you have multiple people in charge. I mean, that's why I like the elder. I mean, I think that's why God created the elder rule. That's why I like elder led churches, because you have that idea where it's not just one dude dictating to everyone what's going on. You have chiefs, you have rulers, you have officers, and you can say, okay, this person's in charge of this. You make sure this is happening. You make sure in charge of this. We'll be over the whole thing. That way you have elders and deacons. That's why there's the beauty of that system. You can have other elders from outside your church speak into what's going on. So like you don't become just focused in on that. You can have other people saying, hey, you know what? That's not quite right. Maybe you should consider this or do that. So there is a beauty in there. There is a blessing in that. And I think if you go to like Exodus 18, and Jethro's advice to Moses was good advice. He says, the next day Moses sat to judge the people, and the people stood around Moses from morning till evening. When Moses' father-in-law saw all that he was doing for the people, he said, what is this that you're doing for the people? Why do you sit alone, and all the people stand around you from morning till evening? And Moses said to his father-in-law, because the people come to me to inquire of God. When they have a dispute, they come to me, and I decide between one person and another, and I make them know the statutes of God and his laws. Moses' father-in-law said to him, what are you doing is not good. You and the people with you will certainly wear yourselves out, for the thing is too heavy for you. You're not able to do it alone. Now obey my voice. I will give you advice, and God be with you. You shall represent the people before God and bring their cases to God, and you shall warn them about the statutes and the laws and make them know the way in which they must walk and what they must do. Moreover, look for able men from all the people, men who fear God, and who are trustworthy and hate a bribe, and place such men over the people as chiefs of thousands, of hundreds, of fifties, and of tens. And let them judge the people at all times. Every great matter thou shalt bring to you, but any small matter they shall decide themselves. So it'll be easier for you, and they will bear the burden with you. If you do this, God will direct you, and you'll be able to endure. And all his people also will go to their place in peace. So he's saying, Moses, you trying to do everything by yourself is not good. It's not good for you. You're going to burn these people out. You're going to burn yourself out and everyone else. You're not going to be able to endure this. You can't do this. It's not possible. There's just too many. There's too much work to be done. You need to delegate. And so that's what Jethro's telling him. You need to delegate this work. So there is, and it's not good for you just to be the only person. Like they will bear the burden with you. And so find good men, and have them help you. Godly men, those who don't take a bribe, those who want to work, those who will be in charge. And he says of thousands, of hundreds, of fifties, of tens. And so he has this kind of delegate. So you have chiefs over thousands of people. Then you have ones that are under them that are just in control of hundreds of people. Then you have ones underneath them who are in control of fifties. And then you have another layer which is in charge of 10. So he's giving them this whole hierarchy of leadership here for the thousands and thousands of people that they have. He's saying you need to break this down. Give these lower rulers, create these lower chiefs here so that you can actually do the work of God that He's called you to do. And you're the one to go between you and God. If you're spending all your time with these people, that's not going to get done. You're not going to be able to go to God like you ought to be. You're not going to be doing what God has called you to do, because now you're just going to be caught in all these petty squabbles and disagreements. They don't need you to do that. They need you to be the one who's going between God and them, right? You need to be the mediator that God has called you to be. Not just, He didn't call you to meddle in all these little petty problems. So you need to concentrate on that. That's what you need to do. Let these other people handle this stuff. You shouldn't have to be concerned about that. Now, they'll bear the burden. They'll bear the responsibility, yes. They're in a place of responsibility and of authority, and they will be judged by God. But, it's not right for you to do this all on your own. And you shouldn't do this. You can't allow these people to do this to you. And don't, because you're not helping them either. It's not good for them. It's not good for you. So, I think we need to learn something from that, that there is godliness, there is goodness in hierarchy of authority. And we shouldn't just, say, well, we don't believe in that. Well, it's a good thing, because he's saying, Solomon's saying, look what goes on here with the ants. They don't have these things, and it's good for them. But we have those things, right? Without they do all this work without having a chief officer or ruler. But we have chief officers and rulers. So how much more? It's kind of an argument from a lesser to a greater kind of thing, or greater to a lesser, actually. Because you're a sluggard. You have chiefs and rulers and officers, and here the ant doesn't have that, and she's doing all this work, and she's doing all these great things, and you have these things, and you're not doing anything. You're a sluggard. You're wrong. And so next time we're going to take a look at that rebuke. He's saying, all right, you see what the ants are doing. They don't have chiefs and officers and rulers. You do. You do. And so now, if you're acting the sluggard, it's time for a rebuke. So come back next time and we'll take a look at that rebuke.